Continue to get reaction to the closure of public schools for a month. Joining us now is Lebogang Montjane, who is Executive Director of the Independent Schools Association of Southern Africa. Good evening. Thanks very much for your time. No mention of private schools. What is your understanding of whether this impacts private schools at all?
Our understanding at the moment is that independent schools are going to be permitted to open and continue to do so.
All right, so you are of the belief that nothing at all changes for private schools?
Not at all. But we have to note that independent schools close on Friday the 31st, and then they reopen. Sorry, I've got my dates wrong. That they are able to open right through. You know, what has happened, I think it's important for us to remember about independent schools is that our schools are actually on and off, online and in contact. And even those schools that actually are in contact learning, our learners are still doing remote learning all the while that the schools are opened.
Do you find it a little odd that private schools are allowed to carry on as they want to, but government schools cannot? I mean, the outbreak affects all of us.
Yes, I think that our minister acknowledges and the president is this: independent schools have a different calendar to those of public schools. So, and I think that that is what is really motivating the differentiation here. Whilst public schools, they can manage their calendars accordingly, independent schools actually have a choice. Even we at ISASA, not all our schools follow the calendar that we actually recommend. Each school can decide on its own.
Yes, and I know that there's a 3 or a 4 term, depending on which independent school you are at. But my question remains, if you have a pandemic and you're concerned about the spread of that pandemic amongst children, why would you not include children who are at private schools as well? It's just 2 different systems.
No, I think that the president used words very carefully today, and I think that what he didn't say was was just as important as what he did say. We have to also note the government has been told by the High Court that they have to continue with nutrition programs. So they have been told that they have to feed 9 million children in South Africa. That cannot be done if schools are completely closed. So I think that we have to note that. Also, pre-primary schools, again under a court judgment, has indicated that they can open as long as they're compliant with COVID-19 conditions. I think that what has happened, as we saw even before government opened up public schools, is that because of the backlog of receiving protection equipment and also making sure that they could be COVID-19 compliant, we had delays. Different provinces could open, some couldn't at that such a time. So it must be really important because the president never had said anything about concern about transmission amongst children. This is, I think, a decision to make sure that in high-level areas that the transmission to adults and maybe older children is not occurring.
But by that same token, there are government schools that are very organised, have all the equipment. Surely then they should be allowed to stay open.
Ideally, we would have loved that kind of level of differentiation, because obviously I think that the government has a challenge in the sense that it runs one calendar. And definitely within, and much of the discussions, even with our national department, was we would love differentiation, but I think that we are struggling to know how actually to implement it.
Well, thank you very much for your time. That was Lebogang Montjane, Executive Director of the Independent Schools Association of Southern Africa. We've got more on the schools to be closed for a month coming up in just a moment. Stay with us.